Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation with Keenan Willard, we're going to talk about a shooting in Halifax County that left a 25-year-old woman dead and 5 other people injured. Welcome to the show, Keenan. Thanks for being here. This has been a sad week. I mean, with young people being killed. You had 3 students, members of the football team, were shot and killed at the University of Virginia. And here in North Carolina, we had this mass shooting in Halifax County that led to this young woman's death. Please just walk me through the details of what happened. Set the scene for us.
So this was Saturday night going into Sunday morning. It was this bonfire party outdoors in a really rural area of Halifax County, kind of between Halifax and Enfield. And it was just on a horse ranch, on a piece of land, farmland surrounding it. And according to the Halifax County Sheriff's Office, this was a situation where hundreds and hundreds of people were coming out to this party, paying at the door to get in. And there was a DJ set up, and this was an event that quickly grew to a point that it was kind of getting out of control in their eyes. And so what happened was around 1:30 in the morning, the Sheriff's Office tells us that gunshots broke up and broke up the party. And it really devolved into a mass shooting, especially if you watch the video of it. I mean, we got clips from people on social media of just dozens and dozens of gunshots, truly sounding like a war zone breaking out. And you just see this stream of people trying to drive away from it, people hiding behind cars. And unfortunately, we know that this was not just, gunshots being fired off into the air. This was a mass shooting, and 6 people were shot total. 5 of them were rushed to the hospital and ended up pulling through, but one of them died from their injuries.
Yeah, and what do we know about the 25-year-old woman, Sierra Webb, who was killed, and also about the other people who were shot and injured?
Really just a tragic situation, according to her family members, people who knew her. Sierra Webb, apparently a very active member of this kind of trail riding community. She's a young mother. She leaves behind a very young daughter that people are now trying to hold toy drives for, especially with us coming up on the holidays. Really just that this was a random stray bullet that, wasn't necessarily targeted but found its way to her. And her family is really just trying to come to grips with this loss.
So tell me about the location of this party. I know you said it was a very rural, it was on a ranch. I believe it's called the Double D Ranch. And my understanding is this is supposed to be about young people connecting with the outdoors and avoiding, kind of the pitfalls of the streets. But what happened seems to be the exact opposite of the goals of this place. What have we learned about, that location and what else might be a motive for this shooting?
So we actually did a story with Dennis Harvey, the owner of the Double D Ranch, last year, and it was about kind of their efforts to connect inner city kids with horseback riding as a way to get them into a healthy activity, and it was a really positive story. And so we saw that this was the scene of where the shooting happened, and I actually went out and spoke with Dennis in the hours after the shooting, and he wanted to make the distinction that this was not a Double D Ranch necessarily activity or event. Basically, he leases the land where this party happened. And so he agreed to kind of contract with people who put on these events. And it unfortunately ended the way that it did. And so it definitely, in his words, actually, he said, this really harms my brand. We will never have another event out here like this, and we're just going to try to stick to the horseback riding because obviously it, as you said, just is in complete contrast with what they're trying to achieve. And so we're at this point where, he's trying to build a bridge to young people, but this was an event that went completely south.
Absolutely. And the party was held, as you said, by a different group, not the ranch itself, a group of promoters. There was one man in particular. And, for people who are listening who may not know what a promoter is, can you explain that? And they're not being held liable in this situation, correct?
That's right.
At this point.
Yeah. What happened is, you start in the weeks seeing up to a party. these flyers circulate on social media. And a lot of them have, the dollar amount at the door, the hours for the party. Across the top, there's kind of like a bill for the guys or the promoters and groups who are putting it on. And these people really are just professional party planners and marketers. And what they do is, they blast out the materials to say, come here, these are the hours, this is when it's going to take place. And their job, truly the description, is just to get as many people as possible in the door at these parties, which is, law enforcement has told us, is a reason that they build up to these levels of hundreds of people. And when we talk about the liability at this point, the Halifax County Sheriff's Office says they are not planning to cite anyone who was associated with putting on this party. And really that's because they say they don't have the laws or the statutes to do so. There's no ordinance banning large parties on private land. They basically have a noise complaint ordinance that would, if they get a call, they could go out and shut down a party. But this area is so rural that they've never had a call for parties that have taken place out there. So at this point, they say their hands are tied.
Before we go to break, how many people were at this party? Is there an estimate? I know hundreds.
From the jump, Halifax Sheriff's Office has said just hundreds and hundreds of people. And the videos that you see on social media easily bear that out.
Gotcha. Okay, we'll be back after the break with more from Keenan on how parties hosted by this same group of promoters have had issues with violence at other Eastern North Carolina venues. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm talking with Keenan Willard about recent violence at a massive outdoor party in Enfield, North Carolina. So, we were just talking about the promoters before the break. This is not the first time that an event by this group has led to some problems. Tell me about that. I know there was at least some reports of issues at an event that they held at a Rocky Mount restaurant.
Hours after this shooting happened, the Halifax Sheriff's Office sent me, we talked about obviously the work of promoters and the social media branding they do. They sent me a flyer for another event that had happened in October, this happening at a Rocky Mount restaurant, and they sent me a picture along with it of the crowd out there, kind of like outdoor in a courtyard area. And so they said, the same people who put on the Enfield party also put on this Rocky Mount event, and they said this event basically ended in a large fight and a stabbing. A 21-year-old who was stabbed and taken to the hospital. So we actually went out and spoke with the restaurant owner. He is denying the police account that a stabbing took place at his restaurant. And he also says that their security footage does not bear out that there was a large fight. So he's trying to contradict that. And we also have spoken now with 3 of the 5 promoters who were on that Rocky Mount bill. They say they didn't have anything to do with the Enfield party, but there are 2 of them who were listed on both the Enfield and Rocky Mount parties. So the common links here, there was a name Jay from Nightcrawlers. That's like an ATV group based out of Halifax County. And then Jacquez Davis, who DJs and promotes under the name Hucklebuck.
Now, it sounds like they also had parties in some other counties, including Nash County, and it looks to me like Sheriff Keith Stone kind of got them run out of Nash County. They even got a zoning law change there in reference to these parties. Tell me about that.
That was his exact wording. He's like, we had to run them out of Nash County. So we did a story of kind of showing the progression of how these large parties moved from Nash to Halifax. And really what we understand is that in the spring or so, the Nash Sheriff's Office started getting these calls. They said, there are four-wheelers and large groups of people on private land. They are, destroying crops. And it kind of progressed from there to, hey, there are gunshots going off at some of these large events. They appear to be growing in size. And they're taking place in, again, rural northern Nash areas, maybe like Castalia, they said was a frequent site of these. And the sheriff's office and the Nash sheriff, Keith Stone, told me they were being billed and advertised as things like horse races and trail rides. And so that's how they were holding them on this land. But they quickly grew out of control. He says it grew to the point where there were RVs of people busing in from states as far as Florida to try and come to these events. Just hundreds and hundreds of people in the same vein as the Halifax party. And he says the real tipping point for them was this July 24th party when they made 2 gun arrests. He says his deputies who were working there to try and control things actually had to stop somebody from going to the parking lot and bringing a gun into the party to do really who knows what. And then they were able to secure a convicted felon who also had a firearm on them. And so at that point, he said he made the decision that they needed to step things up. And he went to the organizers and promoters. He said, I'm planning to bring in ALE to increase enforcement and really clamp down on this. But they also had the county change these zoning laws to make sure they couldn't hold this kind of event on private land anymore.
And I think it was him. Somebody in one of your reports said, crowds, alcohol, and firearms are a lethal combination. And obviously we've seen that in Enfield. Now, I understand in the Enfield party, they did have security. And the security actually says that they prevented 27 guns from being smuggled into the party. And this appears to be proof to the partygoers and to the local law enforcement that there's an issue here.
So the man who runs the ranch, Dennis Harvey, he, in that interview we did the next day after the shooting, he said, my guys were finding guns in coolers. We were finding guns in people's bags, stuffed down their pants. There was a man who came in with dreadlocks who had a gun tied up in his hair and was trying to smuggle this into this party. And so he laid that out to me as we did our due diligence and we made a very strong effort to try and prevent weapons from getting in. And that is not necessarily how it's being received by people who are actually at the party, and especially not by law enforcement. When Keith Stone, the sheriff of Nash County, when he saw that figure, his reaction was, how do you not know that this party is a threat to public safety at this point, and how do you not shut it down? And so the questions about how much security was present, they've been put to us by people who were actually out there. I mean, we talked to a woman who says that her friends had bullets whizzing by their heads while they tried to hide behind bushes and hide behind cars. I understand, and speaking with the people who put it on, they say they did their best, and they even say that they tried to contact law enforcement for even some off-duty support, but from everything that we saw, obviously it was not sufficient to stop the violence.
Where do things stand now with motive, with shooters? I mean, what have we learned?
Not really anything yet. The only details that have been publicly released about how this happened was some witnesses say that there maybe inside the party was a fight between a group of women and gunshots followed. And the one thing we've been able to establish, according to investigators, from things like shell casings, is that the shots were fired inside the party. They also came out in the parking lot. And that's borne out by, again, the just really, really shocking video of what sounds like the war zone that broke out at the end of this party. It was a situation where there clearly were weapons inside and out. And right now, investigators are trying to get to the point where they identify multiple shooters. And when they're getting cell phone videos of just a dark field somewhere and gunshots sounding off, they're running into a lot of difficulties. And they're really asking people to come forward and tell them if they identified anyone who was actually shooting.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm sure you will continue to follow this. Thank you so much for joining us and for your reporting on this. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. You can also listen to entire WRAL newscasts in podcast form. Find WRAL newscasts in your podcast app. The feed is updated with new newscasts multiple times per day.